Hey guys, it's Madison Estes. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking horror trends and predictions. These are common storylines, tropes, patterns, certain types of films, anything that I've noticed that's been really popular last year that I think is going to continue into this year, or new trends that I predict are going to be coming up this year. So the first major trend that I predict this year is that we're going to get a lot more original content than we've been seeing in the last few years, especially last year. Last year was like the year of sequels. We had sequels for movies that I didn't think would ever even have sequels, like Orphan. Pretty much every horror franchise except for Saw, the Purge franchise, and Friday the 13th, and Nightmare on Elm Street, almost everything else had a sequel, like Jeepers Creepers, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Scream, it was so much. Hellraiser, which I don't think it had a sequel for many years. So last year was the year of sequels, but it seems like we're mostly putting that behind us this year. It seems like this year we're going to have a somewhat normal level of sequels, or maybe even lower than average. The Nun has a sequel coming out, and there's going to be a new Evil Dead movie, and there's going to be a few remakes like The Exorcist and Salem's Lot, but for the most part it's going to be mostly original content or adaptations of things that have never been movies or shows before, like The Last of Us, which is a video game. So I'm really excited for this. I'm excited to see more original content and to see adaptations of things that I normally wouldn't ever have any exposure to, like The Last of Us. One trend that's been really popular the last couple of years that I foresee continuing to be popular into this year is vampires. The vampires have been pretty popular the last couple of years. Interview with a Vampire was pretty popular last year. I actually didn't watch it, but everyone's been talking about it, so I'm pretty sure that they're going to continue that series and continue making adaptations of Anne Rice's work. Also, Salem's Lot's coming out this year. I think that's going to be really popular, assuming it's good. Even if it's not, I'm sure I'm going to hear all about it. Also, Renfield is coming out. That's about vampires. I definitely think that this trend is going to continue, at least for the next couple of years. I didn't hear anything about First Kill, and I thought that was going to be very popular. I also thought Morbius was going to be popular, and that was, yeah, one of the worst films of the year, I think. So at least one of the biggest disappointments. But I do think that vampires are going to continue to be popular, and I do think that this trend will continue probably up until next year at least. Two other trends I predicted last year was the rise of 90s young adult horror and folk horror. And while we did have Christopher Pike's The Midnight Club, and it was somewhat moderately well received, I do think that we'll continue to see more adaptations from this time period. I definitely think we're going to see more Fear Street adaptations because that was really popular the year before. I particularly would love to see Silent Night adapted. I think that that would be really fun. While I definitely think that we're going to continue to see more horror stories set in the 90s, I think that we're going to continue to see in general just more horror stories set in the past, more retro horror stories. My Best Friend's Exorcism took place in the 80s. Of course, Stranger Things has made the 80s very popular. The Black Phone took place in the 70s. Why, I don't know, but I was glad that it did because it was cool. Prey took place several hundred years ago. I definitely think that we're going to continue to see more stories that are set in the past, and in particular, I think the distant past, going by some of the movies that are coming out this year. But I think in general, that's just something that's going to be really popular this year and in the years to come. I also anticipated a rise in folk horror, and while I have seen that in books, I haven't seen a whole lot of movies lately that deal with that topic. Now I have a few more new predictions for this year and for the next few years to come that are based on trends that I've noticed in the past few years. The first one is horror dramas. We've seen a lot of these in the last few years. Ari Aster's Hereditary and Midsommar, Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House, The Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, all of these are really good horror dramas. And last year there was a lot of them too, in particular They Live in the Gray, which was one of my favorite underrated horror movies. I definitely recommend checking that out. It's on Shudder. That was about a social worker who could see ghosts, and she's also dealing with grief of losing her only son. I really enjoy stories that can mix a lot of elements of drama and horror in like perfect balance, and that was one that really did a good job of balancing the drama and the horror. Of course, horror drama is a very specific subgenre that's kind of hard to pin down or define, but basically whenever I think about it, I think if I removed all of the horror elements from the story, do I still have a really strong drama? And if that's the case, it's probably a horror drama. I really like this trend. I foresee it continuing in 2023, and I hope that it continues. Another trend I've noticed is a lot of stories about romantic relationships and the issues that can arise within that relationship. Just off the top of my head, Significant Other, Don't Worry Darling were largely about exploring a relationship between two people, and Fresh as well. It was about a new relationship, but nonetheless all of these movies really revolved around dysfunctional romantic relationships, or maybe just relationships that had some problems but that were exacerbated by, you know, the horrifying situations around them. So I really enjoy these types of movies. I do think that we're going to continue to see an increase in these types of films, and I'm really excited about it because I really enjoy films like this. The last trend I want to talk about is one that I mentioned briefly in a previous video, and that is horror comedy. We saw a lot of horror comedies last year, including some films that had sort of a tone shift in the middle of it, like Barbarian. And then I also thought that some films like Significant Other, which were mostly serious, but I think took some really funny kind of comical turns as well. And then of course Violent Night, my favorite film of last year, super hilarious, managed to be a horror film, a Christmas film, and a comedy at the same time. Wonderful film, I highly recommend it. There was just a lot of really good horror comedies last year, and although I haven't seen anything that's upcoming that's a horror comedy, I'm really looking forward to seeing more films like this. I think we're going to continue to see a lot more of these films because, you know, if you don't have a horror drama, you know, if you're not going to make me cry, then make me laugh, you know? So I'm interested to know, what horror trends did you notice last year? What do you think we're going to see this year? What do you want to see this year? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. On this channel, I post reviews, writing advice, horror commentary, and vlogs. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you later.